this. Thank you. Okay, we'll get it. We're getting it. We can talk about sponsorship, how we fund trials. We can talk about how we adjudicate. I have to stay here because of the camera. How we adjudicate trials, and how do we retain patients in trials. That's what we can talk about now. Thanks. So I can go ahead. Right. So we all know that trials cost money. I think there's a misconception in many parts of the world, also where I come from, as using an example, we all have our own environment. Many people think that clinical trials bring in money into the department. That may have been true 20 years ago, but I think now trials cost money. You have to find money to do research. That's the basic principle. Anybody who thinks the opposite is not understanding what's happening. So trials can be non-funded, where you have to find your way to pay your staff and find the time to do it. The institution or the health system might give you grants. You may have your own independent research grant. Sometimes there's more work to get the research grant than to do the whole study. I think in our university, if a person has we have binational grants with various countries. If you get one of these huge grants in Europe, it counts for your promotions committee or as much as writing a paper, because people understand how good you must be and how much work you have to do to get that. And then you have contract research with a sponsor, which is most of what most people do, what I'm mostly talking about in the current age, where you have a commercial entity or industry-sponsored trial, or a government-sponsored by, let's say, NIH in the United States or others, university-sponsored clinical projects. Now, if you think about this, let's just think about this for a minute. The sponsors and investors have totally different aims to me as a physician scientist. And it's all justified. Everybody's correct here. Nobody's wrong. But the guys who are investing really need to show that they are making money and to survive. The company image has to be maintained. It's good for them to promote research. But that's an aim that we don't have. There's a limited incentive to support investigator-initiated trials. I mean, why should anybody do a trial that I'm dying really to know, but maybe the pharmacologist can explain to me about the story. Are we all short of vitamin D? They tell me my blood test that I'm vitamin D deficient. And I said, how can that be? We have like 35 degrees outside in the sunshine. Everybody's dying of skin cancer getting in Israel. And here you tell me I've got no vitamin D. And I explain that, yes, but you're different because you're standing in the cath lab or sitting in your office on liquidity. You never see the sun anyway. My wife tells me the same, by the way. And if when you go into the sun, you cover yourself with sunscreen. So, but I don't know. Maybe the vitamin D levels that we have actually, maybe the values that we are given are not true. It can't be possible that half the population are vitamin D deficient. And I'd like to know what that means. Can it cause harm or not? Nobody's ever going to sponsor a trial that's large enough to answer this question. Big problem. The way you solve these questions is you do it in a 2x2 factorial design, add it as a second question into a trial that's already running. We actually once tried to do this, but the main trial fell away. And you have to be very innovative if you're going to study very important questions like this and have the funding to do it. The sponsor provides input in the trial. That's fine. The medical director of various companies is usually involved. But you have to ensure a very careful, open relationship, that everybody knows that the decisions in the studies and the statistical analysis and the data are not biased in any way. That is, if you want to have a clean trial, that's going to be respected. So there are ways to do it. What about the CRO? Again, the CRO is another player. If it's run by a CRO, which most large multi-center trials are done, where they have their own interests. They're involved in site selection, contracts, submissions, initiation visits, monitoring. They ensure that the data are authentic. They will look at the source data they will want to know about. They will ensure that sit on the backs of the research team to make sure everything's updated, because you need to know almost online. If a number of funny things are happening, you can't look it up a year later, we never had the data up to date. And they will help the the coordinators in the local team with problem solving when there are issues that we're not really sure how you handle them in terms of the trial protocol. But the CRO Actually, I should go back a second. The CRO have their own interests, and we have a good example, which I'm quoting from our own experience, where the CRO are paid by the hour or by the job, and it may take them 1 year to get the submissions done to help the site do all the paperwork to get a trial running. Now, with this once happened to us, it was taking, and every time I asked, why is this taking so long? Because we have 27 sites, and it's in our interest. We run our study to make a profit, our organization. So we've allocated X number of people to do it, and for them it's fine, because all the time they're doing it, they're earning money. And that's what they're paid to do. They're a contract research organization. The investigator is going crazy because he wants to do the study. At the end of 1 year, the company decided they were not going to do the study because some new data came up. So everybody was happy in the CRO. We were extremely unhappy. We wasted a year of our life. So you have to understand everybody has their own interests in a study, and you have to work together. An alternative to the CRO has been an ARO. Now, a good example of an ARO is the Duke set up an academic research organization, or Salim Yusuf did it in Canada at McMaster at PHRI, Population Health Research Institute, where a university-based organization would run the study, all aspects. And here you have highly scientific, professional, independent people. That's great. But these people can do it cheaper but have less facilities. The CROs are so well set up today that it's hard to compete with them. And I've been involved in trying to do studies this way. It's a challenge, and the COMPASS trial was done like this with an ARO. We ran the study in our country. But it was enormously difficult to do, and eventually we are getting help from outside people. The CRO sends a monitor. The monitoring level may vary. That's the bottom line. The monitor can provide advice and assistance. They sometimes don't get on or do get on well with the research coordinators down there. You're not going to be able to do the trial if you don't develop a good working relationship. Somehow you have to get on with all these people, all these factors in a trial, sponsor, the CRO, the investigator, the sub-investigator. You have to have your team working as a team, else you're never going to be able to do a research project. What about adjudication in a clinical trial? We're jumping now to more scientific stuff. It's getting better. I'm sure people here will know some examples where adjudication can change the outcome of a trial. The reason you adjudicate a trial is to try and introduce homogeneity. When we first started doing trials, and we all come from the physicians' background of being physicians and doing your own research, when I was told I must send the data to some guys sitting in, let's say, Chattanooga, or let's say in, don't want to insult anybody, let's say in southern India, to decide if the MI was an MI. You have to realize that the reason for that is not because they think that we don't know what's an MI, but there's some very small differences that they want not to be brought into play from country to country or site to site. So if you have a team of people who are applying the same criteria, like the troponin rise, is it how much above, is it twice the baseline in a patient who's had a procedure, or should it be any rise? If a patient's had bypass surgery, what level of biomarker change is acceptable, because surgery may change the biomarkers. Probably it does, because you probably damage the myocardium. But should that count in the trial or not? So you have a team of people as adjudicators who decide with the trial organization what we are actually going to do in this trial. It pans out across placebo and across study, right? So, but that's what they do. Now, the problem is that it's an enormous problem with the language, the side things. Some people have done national level. We've done a number of trials in our country where a local adjudication team is set up and trained. That saves the organization translating all the documents into North American English. Other people will say, we want the stuff translated into, I say North American English because it's my comment about Americans. The problem is, when I've looked at some of these translations as they've gone past, they really don't tell the adjudicator is not seeing what actually happened. because it's really difficult to understand. So there's a lot of discussion how you do it. Should you do partial adjudication, spot cases? Should you do all of it at a central adjudication committee? I don't know. In the COMPASS trial, which has just ended, as you all know, in the last year, it was shown in Barcelona, right, this year. In the COMPASS trial, it was adjudicated at a national level, but in a very clever way was set up, the events were, there was a program that if the patient had said to have an MI and the computer check showed that on the data reported, there was reports of ST elevation in new onset ST elevation somewhere in the CRF, and there was troponin rise, and there was a number of things that a medical student would know. If they were all done, this was validated that you did not have to adjudicate it if it all fitted together. And in that way, it's claimed that we only adjudicated about 40%, not even half, the events that are in the trial. And only when one of the factors was not fitting in was set for adjudication. So this is a huge area of research. People are now writing papers about how to adjudicate trials. You should think about that too. We're thinking about writing a position paper about this in our working group, actually, about when to stop trials, how to adjudicate trials, and how to run trials. Last thing I'm going to talk about is patient retention. Again, jumping to a different issue that's not covered elsewhere to my knowledge in this course. Patient enters a clinical trial, he signs informed consent. He swallows a tablet, and the next day he dies. So I hear the monitor says the patient's not in the trial anymore because he's dead. And I said, no, he's in the trial. He's an endpoint. He's exactly an endpoint. I said, yeah, but he only took one tablet. I said, yes, but maybe that's what killed him. Or the other way around. The patient took a tablet, and tomorrow he says, doctor, I thought it's always my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, told me that this is very stupid to participate in this trial. It's going to kill you. So I'm giving you back the drugs. I'm resigning. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back to do the trial. I'm sure those who do trials will recognize this. Of course, he's in the trial because he took the drug yesterday. Maybe he took an anti-thrombotic drug that if he did not take it that same day, he would have had a thrombotic event. The one-time dose. So everybody in a trial is always in a trial and needs to be followed. I'll tell you where there's debate about this. I think this is very good discussion. You should think about the philosophy behind it. We had this also. A patient signs an informed consent form. The CRO and the sponsor generally say that means his data has to be counted. But in our particular case, it was an acute coronary syndrome, and while he was being randomized on the phone system by the resident on call in the evening, and had not gone to fetch the drug yet, and while he was being randomized, the patient suddenly got more chest pain, and the doctor got called, said, leave your stupid telephone, the nurse said, and come back. The patient's not feeling well, and so the phone was left off the hook and never got randomized, and patient had an urgent cath or whatever happened. Let's assume the patient dies. It didn't, but is this guy in the trial or not? You can argue all these things, but it's a very interesting discussion. Actually, once you've taken a tablet, then definitely you're in the trial forever. Now, if the patient says, I don't want, in our case, the mother-in-law says, you're not going back to this trial because despite everything, I want you around, I want you to stay married to my daughter or my son, whatever it is. You can say to the patient, take no drug or take less drug, but we have decided we're responsible, we're working together for your health. Come back, do the visits. You don't have to take the investigational product, but you do all the trial protocols exactly as it was set out. The patient is non-compliant to a study drug, but he's taken it for 1 or 2 days or a week, it usually doesn't happen on the first day. It's usually after a few days or a week. You've taken some of it. Try and persuade him to stay on the drug. Say, give it a try. What have you got to lose? It may help you. And then sometimes they do that. The more drug that's taken, the more chance you have an outcome. If everybody in a trial takes study drug and everybody takes placebo drug, you've got a huge power to show an effect. If 0 people take study drug and 0 people take placebo, you've got a 0 chance of showing a difference, right? So the more, if you go between that, the more people take the drugs, even come back to the drug after a holiday of a few days. Okay, try it again. Maybe you can take it. The more doses they take, the more chance you've got. So you try and persuade him to do that. If you cannot do that, he's taking no drug, still do all the visits. The patient then says, but Dr. Lee, I live far away. Why should I come to see you? I've got my own general practitioner, and you're not giving me your tablets. My tablets are not coming from you. Then you say, fine, let's talk on the telephone. And if you don't have, he says, I haven't got time, at least once a year at the end of the study, please. And okay, you haven't got time for that. Would you object if I look in your health records or talk to your GP through a third party to find out that you're dead or alive or that you're okay? I've never yet seen a patient who says, no, I'm not going to let you do that. They always say, yeah, okay, I don't mind if you're really interested in my health. The point is that true total withdrawn consent, which is now a huge issue in medical legal thing. What does it mean? Are you allowed to report on findings in a patient that says he's said to have withdrawn consent? You now have to ask, what does that mean? If he agreed even for his vital status, which is in the public domain sometimes. I mean, some people say, yes, I don't mind if you do that. Or sometimes people, you haven't even asked the question, but then it says all over the newspapers that Mr. XY yesterday died in a car accident somewhere, and you know he was your patient. Well, the whole world knows what's happened. It's printed, it's in the public domain. Should you or should you not be allowed to include that in the outcome of the trial? I think you should be allowed to include it. And some people have said, legal opinions have said that if the patient signed informed consent, he should sign put in writing, I withdraw consent. Until he's done that, you're entitled to write him. Now, why am I talking so much about anything I could say, but particularly about this? Because we have to go through a small calculation here to say what can happen in clinical trials if you lose patients. People who are lost to follow-up or withdrawn consent, this is in the worst case scenario. The FDA or the health authority could do the following calculation because you don't want to hurt the public. So in our example, we're going to say you have 2,000 patients in a trial, not a big trial, small trial, 1,000 placebo, 1,000 active drug, double-blind, randomized, independently, everything was great. And what you found at the end of the trial, that 200 had an event or were dead on placebo and 150 on active drug. And if you work that out, that's 50 less, that's 25%. And let's assume the p-value, somebody worked this out for me, highly significant. And these data are probably genuine. The chances are that you've made an error by error with this sort of value, 4 in whatever, but that's good result and will look good. So let's take that as an example. Now, what happens if you lost to follow-up or you said withdrawn consent, which is very commonly done by the monitors. The monitors and the site coordinators like to do that. Because if they do that, then they don't have to work anymore to look for the patient. My method, which I always tell them, you don't do that. You find the guy. If you can't find him, he's gone. We found some patient in Romania, if I'm not mistaken, who'd gone to live there. And he came back to Israel once a year, and he said, I don't mind, call me, I'll give you my new telephone number. I don't mind about it. It's work. So I tell them to work on every, because if you don't, and you lose even 5%, 50 in each arm, we're doing my calculation. Placebo arm, 1,200 were dead. You may have lost some patients here, but basically the FDA could say the following. You gave the patient some sugar to eat, or no, that's not a good one, because it could damage your health. Let's say you've given him some inert substance, some flour starch of the tablet to swallow. That did nothing wrong to him. So if the patient took placebo and he's lost, you can assume that he's alive, probably, because your drug did nothing but bad for him, because there was no drug. There was no drug. However, when we open the code, this guy's dead, this guy took active drug and you couldn't find him? Wow. Your drug killed him. That's why you can't find him. You gave the guy a dangerous substance. You mean you actually expected to find this guy? You've given him a drug that killed him. So you have to assume the worst scenario, that he's dead. And when you do that, you recalculate the active drug here had 150 events. Here it was less than the 200. But if you assume that the patients who are lost to follow-up, 5%, are dead, you've got 50 people you have to now assume are dead. So now you've got 150 plus the 50 assumptions, you're back on 200. On the placebo arm, you have your 200 in the first place. Zero difference, no result. And there was a lot of controversy in the Atlas studies where the FDA refused to approve rivaroxaban 2.5 small dose, which is approved by the EMA in Europe, as you probably all know. And that was the reason for the COMPASS trial being probably done, and sponsored by Bayer, because they couldn't get, I think they tried 3 times to get it through the FDA, and because the people were lost to follow-up, there was missing data, there was some things like that in the trial that the FDA said, we can't take a chance. We don't have enough concrete evidence to show that you've actually done something good. The results of Atlas 2, for those of you who are familiar with it, I'm sure you are, showed that small dose of rivaroxaban, 2.5 milligrams twice a day, added to other antithrombotic treatments post-acute coronary events, saved lives. And it was too good to be true. I myself personally thought this was play of chance. Now, COMPASS has shown the same result in secondary prevention, so maybe there was something in it. But it's one of the things that happen if you lose patients. So please do everything to keep the patient in contact. Well, I've rambled on long enough about really not much in particular. I think that to ensure a successful trial, you should plan well in the beginning, don't lose the patients. Some people design the ICF which says, when the patient signs it, that says, even if I stop taking the drug and I don't want to come for visits, I will allow you to use my vital information at the end of the trial. And that covers a lot of the legal issues. Watch out for missed or late visits. If your patient's not coming, see what's happened. Maybe something happened to him, or maybe he just lost interest, just to find him. You have to motivate your team. Investigators have meetings and make sure everything runs well enough. And keep your finger on the pulse as you go through a trial. Then you're going to get a good result in the end, which brings us to the great late-breaking sessions that we have at the big meetings these days. Next one, hopefully, in ACC. All right. Yes. That reads by itself. We're very interested in more participants in our programs. We had a very successful meeting in Rome last year. We had Patrick Salzgruber and a group of other people. We had sessions run by young investigators, young trialists. The more ideas and the more people who join us, the more we can grow. So all you need to do is go to the working group website. There's a link. Did you fill in? If you want to join the group, it doesn't cost money. Just complete it. You have to put some information, or upload a CV or something, and it's almost automatic approval, although it has to be approved by the committee or by the chairman of the committee, which is myself at this stage. From your point of view, if you join, it brings you into the group. So thank you very much.